So welcome to our continuous Bhagavad-gītā study today with 2 verses from the 5th chapter, namely verses 8 and 9. And we have the great pleasure of having Mangala with us again. She spoke to us some time ago and her presentation was well received. And we hope that we can hear another nice and practical and relevant presentation today. I hand over to you. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Karuna Shakti, for hosting again so wonderfully and making it all possible. And welcome to everyone. Nice to see you. I'm happy to be here in this virtual room, this virtual temple room. And I would like to start out by, first of all, reading the translation of the verses and Srila Prabhupada's purport. And before that, I would like to chant Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya with you all so that we can pray for the blessing to be touched not only on a mental or intellectual level, but also on the heart. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So these are 2 verses that are translated together. Naiva kiñcit karomīti yukto manyeta tattva-vit paśyañ śṛṇvan spṛśañ jighrann aśnan gacchan svapañ śvasan pralapan visṛjan gṛhṇann unmiṣan nimiṣann api indriya-artheṣu vartanta iti dhārayan. A person in divine consciousness, although engaged in eating, in seeing, hearing, touching, smelling, moving about, sleeping and breathing, always knows within himself that he actually does nothing at all. That's the first line of these verses. Naiva kiñcit karomīti. I'm doing nothing. Because while speaking, evacuating, receiving, or opening or closing his eyes, he always knows that only the material senses are engaged with their objects and that he is aloof from them. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. A person in Krishna consciousness is pure in his existence, and consequently he has nothing to do with any work which depends upon 5 immediate and remote causes. So now Srila Prabhupada lists these causes: the doer, the work, the situation, the endeavor, and the fortune. This is because he is engaged in the loving transcendental service of Krishna. So that's why we don't have anything to do with the doer, the work, the situation, the endeavor, or the fortune, because we are engaged in the loving service of Krishna. Although he appears to be acting with his body and senses, he always is conscious of his actual position, which is spiritual engagement. In material consciousness, the senses are engaged in sense gratification, but in Krishna consciousness, the senses are engaged in the satisfaction of Krishna's senses. Therefore, the Krishna conscious person is always free, even though he appears to be engaged in affairs of the senses. Activities such as seeing and hearing are actions of the senses meant for receiving knowledge, whereas moving, speaking, evacuating, etc. are actions of the senses meant for work. A Krishna conscious person is never affected by the actions of these senses. He cannot perform any act except in the service of the Lord, because he knows that he is the eternal servitor of the Lord. So starting, when we look at this, well, first, before I start, I will chant Srila Prabhupada's pranam mantra and to get some blessings. Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Nityanamane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paśyata Deshatarine Om Jnana Timirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Unmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. And as you know from the last time, I like working with visualizations. So I thought just to structure this verse, because there's a lot inside of it, it would be nice to start with a visualization again. So I just have to see, Karuna Shakti, can you allow me to share the screen of the person that is called a visualization?
Yeah, you should be able to share your screen. Actually, everyone is allowed to share the screen now, but only one person should do it at a time.
Okay. So here we go. So let me just see that I have the right angle. Okay. So this is a person. This is just anyone. And in this verse, there's so many things are listed what we do. So it says the first thing is that we see. So we have eyes with which we see. Then it says that we hear. It's our sense of hearing. We touch with our skin. We smell with our noses. We eat with our mouth. And all of these are called the jnana-indriya. Something Srila Prabhupada also mentioned in the purport. Those are the 5 knowledge acquiring senses, which means that these are the things we gather information with. What are the things that we see with our eyes? What do we smell? What can we feel? And then it goes on saying that we sleep and that we breathe. And the acharyas say that sleeping and breathing, I'm just going to say that these are lungs. I know it's hard to tell, but they're supposed to be lungs. Sleeping and breathing, they're prana regulated actions. And also later on, the purport says that we open and close our eyes, and these are also prana regulated. And the last thing that is mentioned here in this verse is a list of moving about. So I'm going to just highlight the legs for moving about. What else? Speaking. We always have a lot to say. Evacuating. Receiving. So we receive all kinds of things all the time. We give away. So all of these things, and the ones that I drew in green, these are the karma indriya. So this is basically the way our machine of the body works. It's always busy doing all of these things. And inside of it all is our true self, the soul, which we don't really know the shape of it yet. So I'm just going to draw a circle. And so all of these the jnana-indriya, the karma-indriya, the prana-regulated things that are going on in our body, they're just going on all the time. And now so the verse lists all of these things. And then it says how someone who is a spiritualist, how they relate to all of these things that are going on. And what it says is, being aloof from them. So, and having the feeling that it's like, I'm observing something that is happening outside of me. So there's some distance between a spiritualist and all of these things. We can see that this is not me. We are not identified with all of this. And then Prabhupada also writes in the purport that what we do through bhakti yoga is that we bring purpose into them. I'm just going to draw all of these arrows just to signify that whatever we do, I mean, I can, just go like this, and whatever we do it out of the purpose of pleasing Krishna with these. So there's two things that are important here for us. One is that we are aloof from their natural program and we don't identify as all of these things being us. And the second thing is that we bring purpose into them. We don't just let them play out and identify or completely disidentify and then do nothing at all. So our doing nothing is that we are disidentified. And in that sense, we are not doing anything materially, but we are always acting from a spiritual purpose of loving service to Krishna. So this was just to kind of organize this knowledge in our head of all the things that were listed in this verse. And I'm going to stop sharing the screen now. Perhaps even leave. Okay, just have to change my setup real quick. Okay, so when I was looking for things to share with you, the first thing I always do is I search in the database for other places in which Srila Prabhupada quotes this verse in his books or talks that he gave about this verse. And I found out that these two verses aren't quoted very often in Srila Prabhupada's books, but I found a lecture that he gave on these verses. And I just want to read a few quotes from these lectures so we can let the meaning of these verses sink in more deeply. So Srila Prabhupada says, there's a quote, tattva-vit. So this is a word that is used in the verse. This is the word that is used to describe the spiritualist. He's called a tattva-vit. It literally means a knower of the truth. And Prabhupada says tattva-vit means one who knows the truth, that I cannot do anything without Krishna's sanction. So this is another very spiritual and very bhakti-oriented way that Prabhupada is translating this naiva kiñcit karomīti, I'm not doing anything. Prabhupada is saying that, well, like the highest way of seeing this is seeing that I can't do anything because actually I'm always dependent on what Krishna wants and what Krishna is arranging. I can see that and be aware of that, or I can't, but it'll never change the fact that this is true. Then Srila Prabhupada also says, a tattva-vit, one who is in the perfect knowledge and is Krishna conscious, although he is doing all of these things, which we saw in the drawing, all the karma indriya, jnana indriya, prana regulated, he knows I'm not doing. This is tattva-vit. Although he's doing all these things, he knows that I'm not doing. Krishna is doing. I'm simply instrumental. I'm simply an instrument. That is the perfection. I cannot do anything independent from Krishna. Mahatma Gandhi used to say that not a blade of grass moves without the sanction of God. So this is a very, very spiritual and bhakti-oriented perspective Srila Prabhupada brought into this verse. And one other thing that I found really interesting in these lectures he gave on this verse, also concerning this main point of the verse that I'm doing nothing, he says that, let me just read it and then explain it. So sometimes a person may pray, oh, this thing may be done. It may be good, it may be bad. That is a different thing. It may be, I am very anxious. So when he's bent upon doing so, Krishna gives him sanction. Yes, you do it, you do it. He gives him facility. So Prabhupada was now explaining that sometimes we may be very anxious to get a certain thing, that something will happen, and we'll be praying, oh, I hope this happens. Please, Krishna, make this possible. And Krishna will sanction it and say, you go ahead. He gives us a free will. And then Prabhupada adds, but one who has dovetailed himself into Krishna consciousness, Krishna gives him better counsel. He says, you do it like this, then you come to me. So Srila Prabhupada adds that when we pray to Krishna, that that we want to surrender to him, then he starts guiding us. And although externally, materially, it may look like we're doing nothing, internally, we are always acting for him under his guidance. I found some more explanations on these verses from different devotees. The first one is, I have this Bhagavad-gītā purport by a devotee called Itamar Theodore. He's a Gaudiya Vaishnava devotee. I don't know his devotee name. And he says, while dwelling in the body, a tattva-vit, or a spiritualist, observes his senses engaged with their objects as if he was observing an external phenomenon. As such, he sees that the senses are driven by the sense objects, or seen from a wider perspective by the gunas. And also a similar quote from Visṛjan Prabhu's book, who has written this, he's written this elaboration on the Bhagavad-gītā. He says, Krishna here describes how transcendental knowledge, that we are not our bodies, should be expressed through work. This knowledge allows us to remain aloof from the body as we work. So what I thought was really interesting about these couple of quotes is this seeing our bodies and minds functioning as if they were something like an external phenomenon, knowing that it's like some devotees, if you're listening to Wisdom of the Sages, sometimes Raghunath always calls our bodies like a meat suit. So it's like a meat suit. Or recently I heard Satchidananda Swami say it's like a like a diver suit. So it's like a suit. And not only our body is like a suit, our mind is also like a suit. And a devotee sees this suit like an external phenomenon. You know, it has its own rules, its own needs, its own programming. And we have some things that are programmed into our mind from our past that they're just there. Or there are some ways that the mind functions, or that the mind is connected to the whole element of mind, the whole material element of mind. And this material element of mind is, you know, it's like a movie screen in our head. And there's things going on and they're not under our full control. And instead of being shocked or worried by the things that may be going on in the mind, a devotee is aloof from it, seeing it from kind of like an external, something external from oneself. And a devotee knows that these are just thoughts. This isn't me. This is just something from my past, or this is just the way the mind works, or this is just how Krishna or the creator of this world programmed the material element mind so that Maya can also make different suggestions of what we could be doing here. And anything that is anxious or depressive, a devotee just sees, oh, this is from my past. This is from my non-devotee past. And it's a shadow and I can just let it go. It's not me, you know, it's just there. It's an external phenomenon. And I just want to share another picture. Let me see how, I think I have to first share my screen again, right? Yeah. So I'm not sure what you all see now. Do you see this picture? Yeah. So you can also see all of my stuff there, but maybe not to make it so distracting. So you can see here this picture on the left from someone who's totally caught up in their thoughts. So all of their thoughts, there's not this person is not seeing their thoughts as an external phenomenon, or as there's no aloofness, there's no distance. The thoughts, there's like a fusion with thoughts, and a complete identification. So the movie screen of the thoughts, there's not this distance of I'm watching a movie, but the person has become so absorbed in the movie of their own thoughts that they forget that they're actually just watching a movie, and they start crying when a sad thought comes. They start shivering when an anxious thought comes. They become stressed when there's a stressful thought, because there's this very, very, very tight connection to their thoughts. And that's what everyone starts out with as a child. Children are a great example of that. And we can learn to create the state of that we can see on the right here. Someone who has the same exact thoughts, but there's some distance. The person can see that, oh, these are just thoughts. This isn't me. And so this fusion has been separated, and the person is seeing the screen of their mind, but is aware that they are an observer that is seeing the screen. And that is something that we can practice to achieve by realizing that the mind is not us, and our emotions are not always like there are spiritual emotions, there are spiritual thoughts that are connected to our true identity. And there's also things, the spiritual energy can come into the mind and the heart, but there's also a lot of stuff from our mind and our emotions that is not our true identity, and that we need to disidentify from in order to have this feeling of what Srila Prabhupada said in the purport of always being free. Because if we don't have that, if we have this fusion, we will always be in the Bhagavad-gītā, there's this picture of a chariot, and the driver is, if we are fused with our thoughts, like on the left side on this picture, the driver in this chariot is our mind. And the mind will be driving the senses and everything that we do and guiding our actions. And when we get worried, the mind will say, okay, you need to work harder, or you need to, I don't know, put in some extra time. The mind will make all of these decisions for us. And only when we can learn to defuse from our thoughts, to disidentify from our thoughts, the seat on this chariot will be taken by the intelligence and the soul that can guide the body through the intelligence, buddhi, by this observer mode. So this is one huge important point of this verse, that it is really important to disidentify from this, and no matter what's going on in our mind, to take on the bird's view, or there's so many metaphors of this, that you are on top of a mountain, you see the forest, and instead of being in the forest, you see it. Or that instead of being identified with one cloud, one thought in the sky, you realize that I'm an observer. I'm like the sky, and the clouds, they are just moving and they're not me. And so this is the first main point today. And there's a second important step that is relevant here. So this first thing is that we turn away from the things that we are not. We turn away from our worries, our anxiety, our depressiveness, which comes from thinking that we should be in control and then noticing that we're not in control. And so we turn away from that and remind ourselves, I don't need to be in control. Krishna is in control. I'm not my thoughts. So this is the first step. And the second step is that we turn to who we truly are. We find our true identification. And I have a few quotes again, and then I'd like to give an example of how we can practice this. So the first quote that really emphasizes this is from Srila Prabhupada's purport to this verse, where he says, a Krishna conscious person is never affected by the actions of the senses. He cannot perform any act except in the service of the Lord, because he knows that he's the eternal servitor of the Lord. So Srila Prabhupada here says this, that if we're Krishna conscious, we're not affected by the mind and our senses and what's going on there. We don't base our decisions on what am I going to do next, on just this impulsive things that come up in the mind. But we know that I'm an eternal servant of the Lord, and what I want to do is I want to act with love for Krishna, and this purpose of acting with love for Krishna, I want to show this purpose in everything I do, every little action. I want to be guided by this purpose. And I want to set goals that are in alignment with this purpose. And I want to bring it into the quality of how I do things right now, right here, even if I may not have reached my goals. And that can bring a lot of fulfillment if we are guided by that inner sense of purpose and connection to Krishna in love, and instead of kind of being on an autopilot and letting the mind and senses run the show. So another thing I did is I looked for the term tattva-vit in the Srimad Bhagavatam, and there are also some interesting definitions of that term tattva-vit that underline this, not only turning away from what we are not, but also turning towards what we are. And one quote here is from the verse 9, verse 41, chapter 9, canto 3. It is the opinion of expert transcendentalists that the ultimate goal of performing all traditional good works, penances, sacrifices, charities, mystic activities, trances, etc., is to invoke my satisfaction. So Krishna is saying this, that a tattva-vit, an expert transcendentalist, is someone who knows that the true goal of everything we do, this higher purpose, is to please Krishna, to offer him our love. Why? Why do we offer him our love? Because he's the one who offers us the most love. He's the best at offering love. Why is he so held in such high regard? Why is Krishna worshipped by everyone? Because of the way he serves and loves his devotees. And our highest purpose is to re-enter that relationship with him and become aware of how kind he is to us, and return that kindness and show our love and affection for him. And another place where similar thoughts from the Bhagavad-gītā, verse 28 from chapter 3. One who is in knowledge of the absolute truth, almighty armed, doesn't engage himself in the senses and sense gratification, knowing well the differences between work in devotion and work for fruitive results. So this is again engaging in senses, and sense gratification is again, it's letting the senses and the mind run the show. And work in devotion means having that was just my cable, having our heart run the show and be the guide and the one who makes the decisions about what we do and how we do it. So a mantra that you can take away from this talk is 3 words: notice and shift. Notice and shift. So whenever you notice that your aloofness from your mind and your senses has gone away, you've become fused with your thoughts again, to notice that and then shift away from that perspective and that grip of the mind, the spontaneous thoughts that are unfiltered and probably not true, or maybe they are, but just the automatic stuff that comes up, to notice that, oh, now my mind is taking over again, and I'm becoming worried, I'm becoming anxious, I'm becoming depressed, and then shift to this perspective of being Krishna's eternal servitor and of bringing the purpose of bhakti and love into your actions. And I wanted to give an example of how we can do this in day-to-day life. And I thought it's especially relevant, or I mean, it can be applied to anything we do, but something that came to my mind that is a good example is when we are in interactions with other people, because it's not so easy to interact with others. Often we misunderstand each other, and then the mind gets upset. And so and I think that this is really, I once heard Satyananda Swami say that if we have troubles in a relationship or with someone, that is one of the most distracting things from chanting. And from my experience, I can completely agree to that. If if there's some tension with someone, so that's why it's really important to clear these things up, clear the air, and to also see what did I do to contribute to this situation. And I want to so this mantra that I mentioned, notice and shift. So the first is to notice what's going on. So let's say someone said something, someone did something that hurt you. First of all, notice what's going on, notice that pain, because if we don't notice it, the pain or the anger will just carry us away, and we might start shouting at the person. We might start saying something back that we regret later. So first of all, notice that hurt. And that, with this notice comes recreating that distance. And to first of all, really remind yourself, wait a minute, this Bhagavad-gītā verse says, naiva kiñcit karomīti, I am actually not doing anything in this world. This pain, it's a shadow from my past to react in a way that is maybe full of anger, or that is overly identified with the mind. And to break that, to create some distance between that hurt and you, the soul, to take that observer's perspective, to step out of that whole situation, and to also see your own mind as an external phenomenon, and to see what is going on in that external phenomenon right now. That means so all of the thoughts that you're having in that situation, like, this person doesn't care about me, this person is being rude, the only reason they're doing this is because they're selfish, or they never think about how their actions affect other people, or maybe even the thought comes up, they purposefully did this to hurt me. When we do this noticing and creating that aloofness again, we realize that all of these thoughts are just thoughts. The big problem with this identification and this fusion is that we think our thoughts are the truth. We think that, oh, this person actually did this to hurt me. And if we can break that fusion and create that distance, we can see, wait a minute, I'm having the thought that they did this to hurt me, but that doesn't mean that is true. Just because this thought comes up doesn't mean my thought and reality, those are two very different things. The next thing you can ask yourself is, where is this coming from in my mind? What is being triggered in my own mind, from my own past, maybe also, that I'm acting like this? Has something like this happened before, where someone treated me unkindly and maybe now I'm projecting that situation into this situation? Why am I reacting like this? Am I maybe overreacting? Is my mind making this look worse than it is? Again, this difference. My mind is creating a picture. I'm not taking it as the truth. I'm examining it. Because we all have our insecurities and our hurts from the past, and these are things that in the Vedic tradition are called samskaras. So we have negative samskaras that are triggered, and it's very helpful if we can see that, and if we can see how our own negative samskaras are contributing to the picture that our mind is drawing up. And then the next step, practice some empathy and take on the perspective also of the other person. Try to see things from their perspective. What could be another explanation for their behavior besides they did this to hurt me? Because that is often what the conclusion our mind jumps to. And if we can see that this is just a thought, it's not a fact, then we can also be able to be empathetic and take on another person's perspective. And everyone has their own logic, their own reasoning. Everyone's perspective has an internal logic. And if we can try to understand the internal logic of the other person, we might realize some things that we didn't realize from just the picture our mind was drawing. And then you did the noticing. The next part is the shift. And that is try to do something that expresses your purpose in life, being an eternal servitor of Krishna, acting with love for Krishna. And that can be so many different things. That depends completely on the situation. But what is important that you did this notice and shift. And then that will help. The situation won't escalate, and you can, from that moment on, from noticing and shifting, you can start having bhakti guide you through the situation, having Krishna in the heart guide you through the situation, instead of having your own past, your own samskaras from your past guide you through it, just the programming of your mind, which is always so limited. And yeah, and that's really the secret to living a Krishna conscious life. Notice and shift, disidentify from the past conditionings of your mind, and let your eternal Satchit Ananda nature flow into all of your actions by this noticing and shifting. One last thought to just round out this example that I gave about noticing and shifting in interactions with others that are maybe difficult. This is from the Bhagavatam. It's actually, this verse is really, really, really important. It's quoted 2 times in the Bhagavatam and 1 time in the Chaitanya Bhagavat. Realizing that the Supreme Personality of Godhead has entered the body of every living entity as the Supersoul, one should offer obeisances before all. Even the dogs, the outcasts, the cows and asses, falling flat upon the ground like a rod. So this verse is really, oh my God, it's emphasizing so much how important it is to treat others with the utmost kindness, the utmost care, attention, and caution, and to not, and that requires this disidentification from our mind and being connected to Krishna and bhakti in the heart, this noticing and shifting. And by the way, in this verse, it lists dogs, outcasts, cows, and asses. And not because there's something wrong with these entities, but those are usually entities that we may have the fault of overlooking. So that's why they're listed here, not because that there's something wrong with them. That's because we may have the fault of overlooking them. And so what is said in this verse is, be careful of who you might overlook, and be sure that you treat everyone. And there's so many other entities that fall in this category. Ants, children are sometimes overlooked. We could make a whole list now. Yeah. Okay. So that's what I prepared. Those are the thoughts that I had for this verse. Let me just read the verse again and then see if any of you have any questions. A person in the divine consciousness, a tattva-vit, although engaged in seeing, hearing, touching, smelling, eating, moving about, sleeping and breathing, always knows within himself, naiva kiñcit karomīti, I am doing nothing at all. Because while speaking, evacuating, receiving, or opening or closing his eyes, he always knows that only the material senses, and the mind is also a material sense, are engaged with their objects, and that he is aloof from them. We are not our thoughts, and our thoughts are not reality. Yeah, so anyone have any questions? I see that some devotees have joined us here. Or any comments, anything from your own experience that you would like to add to this? Anyone still there, or did you all fall asleep?
There are two people who have raised their hands, namely
really?
Gerda, I think, was first, and then came Krishna Kata.
Okay. Gerda, you go right ahead.
Hare Krishna, thank you for your lecture. I don't know what is it very like serving comment, or like, I don't know, is it a comment or a question? I had to think of dissociative disorder, like when you're like experiencing, let us not, like when, as I understand it, is like you don't identificate with your body anymore. And is this like a Krishna conscious phase? Or because in our worldly understanding, it's like it's pathological, let's say that. Yeah, okay. And what do you think about that? Sorry.
Yeah, thank you. So there's lots of interesting thoughts. So first of all, there really is a pathological disassociation from the body that is a part of mental health issues. And that is not the same as what the Gita is talking about here. It's not a dissociation in the sense that I've never had that, so I can't really explain it that well, I guess. But the dissociation, it feels more like this, like it's kind of like a healthy connection to the body and mind that we need to function is in trouble. Or it can also feel like I'm kind of like not connected to my body. I don't feel my body anymore, which is also, it's actually not helpful, because we need to feel our body, because we need our body to serve Krishna, to do what we need to do in this world. And if we don't feel it anymore, then we can't take care of it. And the same is also true for our mind. So that's not what the Gita is talking about here. It's talking about a distance between the sensations of the body and the thoughts that pop up in our mind, and us as the observer. So we are, in a disassociation, there's like a lack of perception, but in this aloofness that the Gita is talking about, there's not a lack of perception. We see what's going on in our body. We feel what the senses are feeling. We can see the thoughts that we're having, but there's this distance from seeing it as an observer. And just like Srila Prabhupada, he once commented that he also feels sexual energy in his body. That doesn't mean he's going to act on it, but he can perceive it in his body. So he's perceiving it from a distance. And that is what the Gita is talking about. And the second thing you asked is if this is like a pre-stage to Krishna consciousness. And I would say no. Maybe this is surprising to you all now, but this is something that anyone who it's actually like anyone can have this, any spirit, like on any spiritual path, on any, it can even be considered kind of as a material thing. It kind of depends on who that observer is for you, if it's the buddhi or if it's the soul, and there's different ways of looking at it. But you could also just say it's a way of using the buddhi more, and that could be seen as just a material thing that you can also lose again, or just like you can make progress up to very high stages of disidentifying with the body and mind, and then fall back down again and become really absorbed in the body and mind again. So it's not necessarily a pre-stage in the sense that if you have that, you will automatically become Krishna conscious. You can only become Krishna conscious if you chant Krishna's names and hear about him and associate with devotees, because that's where love for Krishna comes from. And without love for Krishna, there's no Krishna consciousness, because Krishna says, I only reveal myself to those who love me. So no, it's not necessarily a pre-stage in the sense that Krishna consciousness follows this automatically, but it is definitely something that if you have Krishna consciousness, you will also have that. So it is something that a devotee goes through, but you have to keep walking. So it's a pre-stage in this. If you keep walking, it can be a pre-stage. I hope I answered your question. Or do you want to add something to that, or do you want to ask another question?
No, thank you very much. That was fine.
Okay. Thank you for listening and asking. And I think Krishna Katha also had a question.
Yeah, Hare Krishna Mataji. Thanks for the lecture. It was very well organized, and the content was also very well organized, as always you do. Yeah, I had this question. So when we, so this is more like when we are going to a certain events in our life, you just need to step back and be an observer there. Like, don't get involved into the situation, but see why it happened and how. So when we come into the Krishna consciousness, when we get familiar with the philosophy and so on, it's much easier to understand. Like, okay, I'll just step back and I'll see. Like, so if just the train is going, I'll just step back and I'll see the train. But if I enter the train, that would be a different experience. And so in connection to this, Mataji, before coming into the Krishna consciousness, whatever that happens in our life, like the Krishna is not involved, even in our thoughts or something. We just go with the flow when we are not into the Krishna consciousness. So whether it's ups and downs in life and so on, maybe if someone is coming from the east, or maybe he has a little faith in God or something like that, but we just go blindly with life and so on. And once we come into the Krishna consciousness, our perspective changes, and we try to orient everything that happens in our life with Krishna and philosophy and Shastra, what he says in the instructions in the Bhagavad-gītā and so on. And so when one is into the Krishna consciousness and his faith has developed over a time, and here the question comes whether I'm still in connection with Krishna or not. So for example, if someone is suffering from a chronic disease for over a long time, and now he's into Krishna consciousness, and his thought process has developed in such a way that, okay, it's my past karma and Krishna is purifying me through this and so on, and he's going happy with his life. though he's suffering with this chronic, he just assumes that it's just the transition phase, it's just part of it. And all of a sudden an opportunity comes in life that he has found some good doctor who has an 99% of success rate, or there's some new treatment for his chronic disease and so on. And then he starts praying like, I never prayed to Krishna to cure my chronic disease. And I was just happy with my Krishna consciousness and so on. But I never asked for it, but this opportunity came. I heard about this doctor who had a 99% success rate. And then I started to pray to Krishna. Maybe Krishna wants me to do something, and that's why he arranged things. And I keep saying to the people around me that, look how this opportunity arrived, that's how the Krishna consciousness is. And even the others also keep saying to you, like, yeah, I mean, this guy is very fortunate. Like, I mean, you can't even imagine, there was no cure for this disease, and this got. And once you got treated, for some reason, it was mistreated, and the 1% failure was in your case. And it turned out to be even more terrible than before. And at this point, one starts to question, one thing is that I had complete faith in Krishna, and still I'm not worried whether whether my faith is strong or not. But the question is, Krishna has made a real fun of my faith, and I don't want Krishna to be blamed for this. But he really played a bad joke with me. Like, I never asked for him. So that's one part. On the other part, it also makes me think, Mataji, that maybe I'm sending the letters to Krishna, but maybe he doesn't know me at all in the first place. Maybe we did not even get in connection in the first place. I mean, we are not connected at all. I am assuming that I'm keep sending the letters, and I'm assuming that they are being acknowledged. But now in this kind of situation, I start to think like, maybe I don't know, I'm not sending the letters to the right address. So he doesn't even know me, whether I'm existing or not, whether he's practicing Krishna consciousness or not, and so on. So how to evaluate this thing, Mataji? Whether that, I mean, when someone who has developed such a faith that even going through the chronic disease, he's not expecting anything, but he's still happy, and going through this all experience, like, now starts to realize maybe it's something wrong, or I'm sending it to the wrong address, or why this Krishna made a complete fun of my faith, or so on.
Thank you. Yeah, that's actually something I've also heard about in discussions with different devotees who are going through things, and then they start wondering, why is Krishna doing this? It doesn't seem to make sense to me. Or in your example, that this person wasn't even praying for something, then something happened and he thought, okay, maybe I'm supposed to take this chance, and then it didn't work out. And then this question comes, why did Krishna do this? Does he even know me? Is Krishna allowing himself a joke on my cost, or on, and the root problem with all of these. So first of all, we should never think that Krishna would do such a thing. He would never ever do something to have a laugh in our, so that he can laugh, or that he's just making I know that some people worship him like this, that he teases, and that's not what I mean, teasing, because teasing is something different. But in this case of chronic illness and things, I mean, that's not teasing. Those are really hard challenges in life. And I think that basically we need to accept that we can never really know why the things that are happening unless Krishna reveals it to us. And Krishna is he's holding himself back from us at the moment, so that we can increase our greed for him and our feelings of missing him. Because the more we miss him and the stronger we long for him, the deeper our love will be once we enter into his Leela. And so that's why we are going through this long phase. And it's not that Krishna doesn't send signals, he does, and he gives us signs that he exists, and he does all of that to keep us motivated, but usually he doesn't come and explain why things happen in this world. And I think also to protect those people or those souls that don't want to surrender to him yet, if he would constantly show up and explain everything, it's really hard to be an atheist. And he made this world so that it's easy to be an atheist, So he wants to protect the free will of everyone. And so that's something we really need to just surrender and accept, even if we don't like it, but to accept that I may not know why the things that are happening in my life are happening, but, and this is where faith comes in, I have full faith that Krishna is the kindest, most compassionate being, and that everything he does and everything that's happening is happening from a place of kindness and love and care. So then to just have faith that whatever is happening is meant for my own advancement in Krishna consciousness. And we have been on this path probably longer than we know. And even before we got Srila Prabhupada's books, Krishna probably heard some kind of calling, maybe even in the life before this one. So maybe even the diseases we have are maybe even directly arranged by Krishna, because he knew that we would continue on our spiritual path and that this disease would help us continue and help us become more loving and kind. And if something happens like that suddenly a seemingly cure comes up, but then it goes wrong in that 1% of person, and that is also Krishna's arrangement for that person, even though we can't see why and how. It's not a joke. It's not that he's Krishna would never do that. And it's important to have that full faith, because why would we be motivated to surrender to a Lord who's not fully dedicated to us also? And the good thing is that Krishna is like that. I'm not just making this up so that we are more motivated to practice bhakti. This is just what scripture and the sages teach us, is that this is the way Krishna really is. He's just kind, and he's just there doing whatever he's doing so that we can benefit from that. Mm-hmm. And it's really important that we develop our faith in that. And that's why it's so helpful to read about Krishna and to read the stories from the Bhagavatam and to see how he's taking care of everyone, how he's arranging things for everyone to be taken care of, and to develop that faith and not have thoughts like, Krishna maybe doesn't understand what I'm going through. He maybe made a mistake with me, Krishna, he knows everything. He understands us perfectly well. He was also in contact with us before we were in contact with him. So he knows us better than anyone will ever know us. And he knows exactly what we need and exactly what is best for us right now, even if we can't understand it to the depths that we would like to understand it.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mataji.
If you want, you can also add something or comment, or if you have some thought that is left.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, so one thing was with regarding to the faith. So in this whole episode, my major concern was that if I kept all these things to myself, I would be really happy that I have faith in Krishna, and he has done it for a purpose, and I'm definitely sure he will reveal that. Even if he doesn't reveal it, I'm not concerned about that, because he did it for my own good. And when I actually said these things to others, like, see how Krishna arranged these things, like I was not expecting, and it came and no one was done. And when I kind of kept saying this to others and so on, and then Krishna has turned it upside down, then it was like, Krishna, I mean, if you had turned it upside down, when this information was only within me, or when I did not share this to anyone about you and so on, it would have been really good. And now I shared with others that, okay, see how Krishna arranged and so on. And now you made complete fun of me. Like, if I had not said this to others, like I would have been much happier, because I know you did this on purpose. I know that there is some purpose, but I'm not capable to understand at this moment. But like you kind of made fun of the whole situation. And even I did not ask for this situation to happen. And you introduced this situation, and you again like turned it completely upside down.
Yeah, that's also one thing that I also had a thought before and came back now when you spoke, is I think we, as a conditioned or as a soul in this world, we are in a world of duality of good and bad.
Mm-hmm.
And so we make the mistake of taking the good as a sign that Krishna is being merciful, and that the bad is that Krishna is somehow neglecting us. But actually, that this is a huge concept to think that only the good things in my life. So when something good happens, we go around and say, you know, Krishna is so kind to me. This happened. I'm so grateful that Krishna has now done this. I think, you know, and then to think when he takes it away again that this was not him. You know, and so I think, yeah, it's good to be careful of how we frame things, and to be aware that he's always there, and that he can always take everything. He can give things, he can take away things, and that's both of those things are happening by his hand. And maybe we should start telling others when we go through some difficulty how Krishna sent that, and is his mercy that we went through that difficulty, and then share what we learned. That would be maybe an interesting way of shifting things up. But in the end, I think it's kind of like actually it's like a misconcept also in the people that were, when you said you shared this with some people, and now they're thinking, oh, now Krishna has kind of turned against you. That's actually their misconcept, to think that, you know, now he's turned against you. He was there with all along, and his giving was him, and his taking is now also him. So it's a misconception to think that mercy comes only when it's sweet. You know, there's also this bitter mercy.
Yeah, that's true. Thank you very much.
Thank you for being here and your thoughtful question.
There you go.
Okay, anyone else want to share something or have something to add or a question? If not, then Karuna Shakti, I think we've come to an end, right?
Yes, I think we can conclude here. And thank you very much to Gerda and Krishna Katha Prabhu for asking relevant questions. It was very interesting. And also, of course, thank you, Mangala, for giving a wonderful and relevant and interesting and visual lecture, or a lecture with visual elements, because human beings, as I said, I think I said it the last time, human beings are very visual. They need some visual input. I know that, for example, in the German parliament, they are not allowed to show anything, that they are not allowed to bring anything and use it as a gimmick during their speeches. People have to speak, and people are obliged to speak freely and not read out some text, but they have to speak, and that's the only thing they can do, and there's no other additional elements they can use, which is maybe good in terms of fairness, but not so good in terms of understanding things or making things clear and relevant and easy to understand. So here we have the liberty to use whatever technical means we have and share the screen and draw and make some colorful human-like creatures with lungs and arms and different organs. So that's very nice. And yeah, we are looking forward to next week. We still don't have a confirmation, but we're working on something, and we will definitely have another interesting speaker for next week. So we hope to see you next week for text, 510. And we thank you very much for being here and hope to see you next week. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you again, Mataji. Hari Bol.
Thank you. Thanks to all of you and Kamala Shakti.